Welcome to the Ready Set Gemini podcast. I am your host, Dan Mora, and directly across from me,
Hey everybody, it's Frank.
Frank. How goes it?
Goes good.
Yeah,
How about you?
it's good, man. It's
Living life?
yeah. Happy Monday. Got some summer plans. I got a really busy summer. It's like kind of
Me
ridiculous.
too.
It's not how I want it.
I was hoping to have a lot of staycation. I've been building this swim pond, and we're getting really close. We have one filtration system like up and running, and the pond is full, or we've been swimming in it, but all the life that was on the moss rock, the moss and the lichens and things like that, when it's submerged underwater, it starts to die, and it's like getting into the water. So I need to put a little bacteria in there to start eating that up, and we got to get the filtration system going. If we do, let's say this week, I'm not even going to be able to use it for the next couple weeks because I'm gone.
Oh,
So kind of a bummer, but maybe give it some time to normalize and do its thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's your big plan this summer?
Well, this week I'm
Staycation.
going to do lots of staycations. But my oldest, just graduating 8th grade, is going to do the Washington, D.C. and New York trip with my wife. They're going. And then my youngest and I, we're going to be driving up to Idaho, do a little camping, overlanding.
Oh, cool.
It's going to be fun. So those are that's coming next week. So after that, not really any plans. Oh, we are going hot air ballooning for my anniversary in Napa. So you had a crazy story about hot air ballooning, right? Like, did it go sideways or something? Like drag you on the ground, or?
Yeah. It was when I asked my wife to marry me. I asked her in a hot air balloon, and it's all whatever. It's all sweet, la, la, la. It was kind of a stormy-ish day, which is not advisable. The wind kicked up and flew us over a major highway, over Highway 80. And so the guy's strategizing on where to drop us. And it's all fields, it's all open, so it wasn't really dangerous except like power poles and highways. You don't want to do that. So we floated over Highway 80, and then we had enough speed where we had to crash land. And basically what that means is you land as you're moving at a pace that you don't want to move. And the basket, it's a 10-person basket. It tips on its side and just drags on the ground for however long until it's done.
How many people were in there?
It was 10 people.
Oh my gosh. Did you guys falling all on top of each other?
No, they prepared us. 'Cause it's slow. So you squat down into the basket and hold on.
What a story. Don't tell my wife. That's for sure.
It was good.
Yeah, that's interesting. We got some headlines today.
All right.
Let's see. First one I think is a little interesting. It's from Wired Magazine on 5/22. Meta's $1.3 billion fine is a strike against surveillance capitalism. So it says the record-breaking GDPR penalty for data transfers to the U.S. could upend Meta's business and spur regulators to finalize a new data sharing agreement. So it's been almost exactly 5 years since the continent strict data rules came into force. Meta has been hit with a colossal $1.2 billion fine for sending data about hundreds of millions of Europeans to the United States, where weaker privacy rules open it up to U.S. snooping. And I think the most interesting thing here is, we're all worried about TikTok and China, and is China going to grab our data? But yet the U.S. is doing exactly that. Of course, they got hit with a $1.3 billion fine. I'm kind of interested in what type of profits they made from that data, though. It's kind of where, maybe I go to conspiracy all the time, but if they made $100 billion off of it, is it really that bad if they lost 1.3? So interesting stuff. Any comments?
I'm curious, what they do with that data. That's kind of how do they? I'm just curious. What do they do with that data? How is it?
Data is money.
Yeah.
AI is the first thing that comes to my mind. What can they do with it?
So just to increase their
selling it to marketing companies to target ads to individuals, that type of stuff.
Targeted ads, etc.
Yeah. So this one's kind of interesting too. This is from Reuters on 5/18. So under ethics pressure, California State Bar advances lawyer snitch rule. I looked through the article. they don't say where the coined term snitch rule comes into play. So I think that that's a little interesting that that's the lingo they're using. But lawyers in California may soon be required to report professional misconduct by their peers and colleagues, as do attorneys in every other state. So this is already a thing that all the other states. I'm surprised it isn't a thing for California. And even more surprisingly is there was like over 200 attorneys that are like opposing it and saying it's going to create like undue burdens and things like that. Who are those attorneys? Like those ones are a little fearful. Like they reporting people that are doing fraudulent activity as snitch doesn't sound right to me. Sounds a little mafioso.
Yeah. I kind of think that couple things, you know, there's this rule, this bar rule allows it exempt. The snitch rule doesn't work when it's attorney-client privilege, and there's other situations like what was it? If there's any sort of substance abuse or mental health concerns, it doesn't apply. But yeah, very interesting to call it the snitch rule. I just think that's kind of entertaining.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think maybe the opponents, the 200 opponents that wrote letters, maybe they're just libertarian in their perspective and say, we don't need rules to govern ourselves. Yeah.
Sure. That's fair. Let's see. In Oregon, this is from Business Insurance. This is on 5/17. Physician assistants can treat comp patients under new Oregon law. I thought that this was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think the concerns that come up in my mind are the injured workers going to get the appropriate treatment? Kind of feels like Oregon's doing some similar things to California. We were talking about AB 1287. Is that the right one? Yeah.
1278.
1278, yeah, to choose their physicians. And then wasn't there another one about like the specialists, like removing specialists or something like that?
Yeah, similarly. So the SB 697 Hurtado, which was the value of, this is a study for value of care.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So it seems like everywhere they're just trying to find ways to reduce costs is what I would imagine. And seems like they're thinking about doing it by trying to make care more accessible, but not necessarily, it doesn't seem like.
Yeah.
If you're getting specialists, I mean, I guess if you can get in faster, you can get treatment, that would be good. But if you're getting it from someone that's not a doctor, like, is that the right direction?
I tend to, for what it's worth, I like to study kind of just civics, and Oregon has this track record of compromise, really kind of a good track record of compromise. And I think that the healthcare systems healthcare in general has improved, I think, so much that there's less of a concern that patients get left behind in those larger systems. I mean, of course it can happen, but I think that this is a logical compromise.
Okay.
It's not what California, at least the applicant attorneys, want. And surveys have said of patients that they want more of that individual care as less of the group kind of care. That's what I think the average person wants. But when you have a cost to the system, like workers' compensation is a cost to the state from a taxpayer perspective, there's got to be some compromise.
Yes. Interesting. Okay, so on to our main topic. County employees attacked at work find a big hole in California's workers' compensation system. And this surrounds, what's that term that we were just talking about, Dan? I lost it.
Yeah, it's the exclusive remedy.
Exclusive remedy. So this was first kind of brought up when we had that San Bernardino shooting in California. And there was a lady there that got shot in the arm by a police officer with an AR-15, or maybe it was an M16's military issue. And it says, after 4 major surgeries to piece her arm back together, a year of recovery, and nearly 2 years after her injury, Boston Myers workers' comp attorneys won her $202,000 to cover any more medical problems that crop up from her injury over the rest of her life. And so what what she's thinking about with that cash is it's not enough. And we can talk about, did she have good attorneys and representation and that type of stuff. But for comparison, there was a case that was called the Collazo family. They were sitting in a traffic jam near Chapman Avenue exit to the 57 freeway when they were rear-ended by a sheriff's investigator in 2017 driving a Ford F-150. He was looking for his radio on the floor, and he smashed into him. Multiple people in the car suffered serious and permanent injuries. And according to those same records, and a county jury awarded the family nearly $2.2 million in damages. Mm-hmm. So police force was responsible for an injury, $2.2 million. Police force was responsible for an injury, $202,000. So what's the difference? One, the girl that got shot in the San Bernardino shooting, she was working for a county building, and the county police shot her. So essentially what ended up happening is the police force had no liability from a civil perspective because workers' compensation was going to take it over in its entirety.
Yeah. Just point of correction. This woman that was shot, it was an accident at the John Wayne Airport in Orange County. So the San Bernardino was the mass shooting.
Okay.
Yeah. But this woman, Boston Meyer, was accidentally shot by an Orange County sheriff while working at John Wayne.
Interesting. Thank you. Sorry for clarifying that.
But same, we know where you're going.
Yeah. So another similar story, let's see this one. This one's kind of interesting, worth a read. So it says, it was a sheriff's canine Belgian Malinois. Those are pretty awesome dogs, by the way. Let loose for a training exercise at Coleman's office inside an Orange County Public Works building, which sheriff deputies thought was empty. He describes the experience of having a trained dog attack and seize on his limb as harrowing, one that still haunts him today. It just started ripping tissue out, and I heard so many loud noises coming from my arm. This is Coleman. This is what he says. Mm-hmm. Crunching, snapping, he adds. I thought I crushed my bone. So while Coleman was fighting the dog off, his mother could hear everything over the loudspeakers, over speakerphone, and was calling out for him to answer. My mom was freaking out on the phone, and I couldn't answer. The dog was on top of him for nearly a minute and a half. The dog had my arm and was shredding it, Coleman said in an interview with the Voice of OC. I thought I was going to maybe just end up dying there. While the canine incident was nearly 5 years ago, there still aren't any public records available on what happened to the officers involved in the incident or details on charges made to the training program. And that Coleman said it's unacceptable. What is there to hide is what he's asking. And they will spend whatever they have to avoid accountability. So same concept. I think this guy's being smart where he's not settling for future medical, but he's definitely going through the work comp system, and he's made quite a few different complaints. He said at one point it had to wait 4 months to get a cortisone shot in his arm. Wow. And he had to go out on his own to buy a $6 arm sling brace, whatever it may be, because he got denied.
Yeah.
So just some ridiculous type of stuff. So you can't sue the police when you're working for the county, just like the police are working for the county. The mom, on the other hand, was able to sue because she wasn't obviously working. She heard that. She was awarded $10,000 just for listening to it on the phone. Yeah. And this guy, he's basically running through the work comp system, really feeling like he's not represented.
So the Great Compromise. So workers' compensation is for me, fun little research into history. You had an industrial revolution in the late 1800s, and by 1917, people were demanding workers' compensation as a benefit. So the Great Compromise is represented in our California State Constitution, passed in 1917, that says that in trade for assumption of fault and for whatever is needed to relieve that injury, you cannot sue the employer in tort. So tort is torturous tort is short for torturous. It means pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So that pain and suffering is not, you cannot sue the employer for most of that. Now that's the umbrella, and with that exclusive remedy, that umbrella is really difficult to pierce. And then underneath that, they layer regulation that either exempts from that exclusive remedy or further protects that exclusive remedy. And what I think we're seeing here in both of these cases is it has strengthened that exclusive remedy, so that and it kind of makes sense. I mean, from sheriffs and people holding guns is a dangerous profession, and there could be a lot of pain and suffering that comes from, violence and law enforcement. We'll just call it law enforcement.
It's with law enforcement. I think there's a couple interesting things about this. First, let me read this quote. So Dane Gilliam, he's the Orange County chapter president for California Applicants.
Shout to Dane.
Yep. And I think he's good in his assessment here. He basically says both these cases that we've been talking about fall under exclusive remedy, but it doesn't necessarily make it right. I think that it is correct interpretation of the law. It's kind of unfortunate, Gilliam said in an interview with the Voice of OC. Is it fair? No, it's not fair. Work comp in general isn't exactly an equitable system.
It's a compromise.
Yeah. And I think, we're hopefully trying to get to better equality. Knowing that it's not necessarily 100% equitable system, it seems like this is a small carve out, like with this county to county type thing. You have two different companies. They're just employed by the same larger employer. What is a little concerning to me, besides, the reimbursement to the injured worker, is the accountability piece. If a police officer's, let's say they're going into a school, a public school, like that's a county run thing too. And then in the pursuit of, the bad guy, they end up injuring someone there.
Yeah.
It's almost like they don't have to worry as much. I'm sure that the police department itself has some type of policies and like, hey, if you do something wrong, this is what's going to happen. Yeah. Is it a suspension? So like they go in and granted, this is a horrible place to be. They're in the heat of the moment and all this type of stuff, but the liability for them when they're in this type of situation really goes out the door, because they don't have to care for it because the employer is going to take care of everything. So that individual that's responsible for lives, saving them and taking them, I don't know. That's
to a degree, but see, I would. Okay, so I was watching something recently on the initial space program, and they were really trying to find the best pilots that they could find in order to test but putting them on rockets, etc.
Sure.
For this, Eisenhower spoke out and said, "There's no doubt that 100% of these pilots are going to be military." For that reason, 100%, because of the risk associated with that dangerous, very, very dangerous. Of course, a lot of test pilots and early astronauts lost their lives. But because of that danger association, there's the military has its own laws. Its military code of justice, I think, it's been a minute since I've quoted that, but really for this reason, the layer of danger that's associated. And I kind of think, I'm trying to be devil's advocate here. In 1917, there was a lot of dangerous jobs out there, and they're trying to protect the entrepreneurial, corporate, whatever you want to call it, the capitalist system to a degree.
Sure.
While trying to protect the employee. You get hurt, you get smashed by a machine, what have you. There's compensation available to you.
Yeah.
Difficult line to draw there, all these exemptions and or reinforcement of the exclusive remedy.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Lots of lawmakers, lots of laws that they can write. And
so I'm wondering, I guess my last question here is this going to be a catalyst for work comp reform? Like these types of things getting into the media, making more people aware of these little tiny carve outs that can impact injured workers and their lives?
I hope so. I hope so. I think the media is such an amazing tool for decision makers to hear what the reality of the situation is on the street, as opposed to, committee consultants and, intelligently written reports about costs and liability. That's different than these stories of where people are literally, their lives are
really
severely impacted.
Yeah.
So I hope.
Really impacted.
I think that there's a movement. I kind of look at things as a pendulum, and I think there's a movement towards, more stories of injured workers that are going to get passed uphill. Needs to. I feel confidently there's going to be a work comp reform bill.
Yeah.
In the next couple of years.
It's interesting to see these little different things that are happening in the work comp world slowly start to build, and then you could just feel like, okay, this reform is coming, and what's that going to be? And you don't know until it pops, and then there's a scramble to, make changes and get things to benefit all parties in the system.
It requires an extraordinarily skilled leader to take something so complex and so giant and bring in the subject matter experts and know what to listen to and what not to listen to.
Gosh,
I
daunting.
do not envy the people that need to do that. It's kind of work that I'm glad I don't have to do.
I mean, you do a bunch of it, in all honesty, with the coalition. Like, you've been in the mix of it and trying to create change, and it's really rewarding when things pay off and people, have better lives due to regulations.
But it's really a painful, like watching paint dry, watching grass grow.
Yeah, it's so slow.
Watching a pot boil. It is painfully slow getting legislation done, which is hard. It kind of speaks to this whole, these exemptions, right? These exclusive remedy exemptions and or reinforcement things. They may, it takes a long time to get them working, number one, or just get them ideated and then working. But then if they're bad, it takes a long time to repeal them.
Yeah. And in all honesty, I think the way that the work comp system is set up, like, there's little carve outs that, obviously have these problems, like these county workers, but for the most part, people are getting taken care of, and hopefully that just continues to improve. So we'll see where it goes. Any final thoughts?
No. I advocate for people to be interested. People that are listening, I think, that are in this industry, I think I just advocate that they're interested in some of this nuance. Probably, to me, is why we're doing this and why we're getting this stuff out here. It probably doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah. So with that, please comment. I want to hear some feedback so we can talk about it. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
And of course, subscribe as well. So
it's
been a pleasure.
All right, Frank. Take care.
Thanks.